Putin has been betting on one thing for 4 years, that Ukraine will break first. But on May 27, 2026, Volodymyr Zelensky didn't just answer that bet. He left Putin completely paralyzed. Zelensky ordered his entire government to prepare for the war to continue through 2027 and possibly through 2028. When the news broke, most people thought this was a sign of Ukrainian exhaustion. They thought it was a country on the brink. They were completely wrong. Zelensky didn't make this announcement out of weakness. He made it because he knows a devastating secret that Putin is desperately trying to hide. The Russians themselves agree with Zelensky. Right now, behind closed doors in Moscow, senior Kremlin officials are privately admitting that the Russian war machine has reached a dead end. While Putin promises final victory on television, his own inner circle knows his timeline is completely unachievable. In this video, you will see the brutal, undeniable math behind Zelensky's 2028 masterstroke. You'll understand why Ukraine just set the ultimate strategic trap, and why Putin's own government knows they are the ones running out of time. Let's be precise about what happened on May 27th, because the details matter. The Economist, one of the most respected publications in the world, cited sources inside the Ukrainian government. These were not press releases, not public speeches, internal government sources, people inside the machine. What they said was this: Zelensky has ordered Ukrainian officials to prepare for the war to continue for another 2 to 3 years. The exact quote from a government source was, "There is no convincing reason why Ukraine cannot continue fighting for so long. It will survive." Read that again. Not "we hope to survive." Not "we are struggling to survive." We will survive. On that same day, Zelensky was also pressing the United States for more Patriot missile systems. He sent an urgent letter to President Trump warning about Ukraine's critical air defense shortages. He was simultaneously asking for weapons and planning for years ahead. That is not the behavior of a country on its knees. That is a country managing a long war from a position of strategic clarity. And here is the critical context The Economist also reported. U.S.-mediated peace negotiations have reached a complete dead end. Washington has effectively pulled back from the process. There is no deal on the table. There is no framework. There is no timeline. There is nothing, which means the war continues. And the only question now, the only question that matters, is which side's resources run out first. Zelensky has done the math, and he is telling you the answer. Here is the framework you need to understand this decision. Every war of attrition, and this is absolutely a war of attrition now, comes down to one question: whose resources collapse first? Not who wins on the battlefield on any given week. Whose money, manpower, and industrial capacity breaks down first? Zelensky is betting on Russia breaking before Ukraine does. And when you look at 3 specific areas, Russia's oil revenues, its recruitment numbers, and its financial reserves, that bet is looking increasingly rational. Let's go through them one by one, because the picture that emerges is not what Russian state media is showing you, and it is not what most Western headlines are telling you either. Russia funds this war with oil. That is not an opinion. That is the budget. In 2024, oil and gas revenues made up 30% of Russia's entire tax and export income, $120 billion. Roughly 85% of that came from oil alone. No oil money, no war. Ukraine understands this. And Ukraine has spent the last year doing something extraordinarily methodical, burning Russia's refineries to the ground. In April 2026 alone, Ukraine conducted at least 21 strikes on Russian oil infrastructure, refineries, export terminals, offshore platforms, pipeline pumping stations. 21 in 1 month. That was the highest monthly total since December 2025. According to Bloomberg, which tracked every public statement from both sides, these strikes pushed Russia's average refinery capacity down to 4.69 million barrels per day. That number needs context. That is the lowest level Russia's refining capacity has been since December 2009. 16 years of capacity erased. Russia's own statistics agency, Rosstat, confirmed it, even after the Kremlin had quietly stopped publishing detailed fuel output data. The official index for coke and oil products, essentially what refineries produce, showed a drop of 9.2% in April compared to the previous year, and 11.3% compared to March. The Tuapse refinery on the Black Sea coast has been hit 4 times in the space of 2 weeks. 4 times. Ukrainian drones struck on April 16th, April 20th, April 28th, and again on May 1st, reigniting fires that Russian emergency services claimed they had extinguished. Each time, Russia said its air defenses intercepted the attack. Each time, the satellite images showed the fires burning. On May 8th, Ukraine hit the Yaroslavl refinery, 282 kilometers northeast of Moscow. On that same week, the Permnefteorgsyntez refinery in Perm, roughly 1,500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, was struck. Then the Kurishi refinery, an export-oriented facility near the Baltic coast, where Ukrainian drones destroyed 3 primary crude processing units and a fuel storage tank. Zelensky himself put a number on the damage in May. Ukraine's long-range strikes have knocked out approximately 10% of Russia's oil export infrastructure. Some Ukrainian analysts put the figure higher. And here is the critical strategic point. Every liter of diesel that does not get refined is fuel that does not reach Russian armored columns. Every tanker hit in a Russian port is oil revenue that does not reach the Russian military budget. Ukraine is not just striking buildings, it is striking the financial pipeline that connects Russian oil wells to Russian tanks. The oil story would be damaging enough on its own, but it is happening alongside something even more fundamental. Russia is running out of men willing to fight. This is not a Ukrainian propaganda claim. This is a data analysis published in April 2026 by Janis Klug, a German economist at the Institute for International Security Affairs who tracks Russian military recruitment using regional budget data. His method is simple. He looks at how much Russian regional governments are spending on signing bonuses and compensation payments, then works backwards to the number of soldiers being recruited. His finding for Q1 2026: Russia was recruiting approximately 800 contract soldiers per day, down from 1,000 to 1,200 per day in the same period of 2025, a drop of 20% year over year. That 20% drop is significant on its own, but combine it with what Russia is simultaneously losing and the picture becomes alarming. In the first quarter of 2026, regional budget data shows Russia paid death compensation to the families of approximately 25,000 fallen soldiers. That is across the regions where data is available, extrapolated nationally. 25,000 dead in 3 months. That is roughly 270 confirmed deaths every single day, just in official compensation filings. Let that number sink in. Russia is officially losing around 270 soldiers per day, and it is only recruiting around 800 new ones. The gap between losses and replacements is closing, and not in Russia's favor. Russia has tried to plug this gap with money. The average signing bonus by March 2026 reached 1.47 million rubles. At least 12 Russian regions have raised their bonus payments above the federal level. In some regions, bonuses have been increased 200 to 500% above 2025 levels. The government doubled the federal signing bonus. It is not working. The reason is structural. The recruitment pool has changed. The men who were easiest to recruit, the financially desperate, the unemployed, the young men from remote Siberian towns who saw the signing bonus as a lifeline. Many of them are already gone, dead, injured, or have already completed their service contracts. What remains is a harder sell. Men who know exactly what the front looks like, who have seen what happens to the units being sent to Pokrovsk and Donetsk, and who are increasingly choosing not to sign. Klug's conclusion is stark. For Russia's planned summer 2026 offensive to have any realistic chance of success, monthly recruitment would need to reach at least 45,000 soldiers per month. The current rate is roughly 24,000. That gap does not close with money. It closes with force, meaning a general mobilization that Putin has been politically unwilling to call. Now let's talk about the money, because this is where Zelensky's 2028 calculation becomes crystal clear. Before the full-scale invasion in February 2022, Russia had built a war chest, a financial cushion specifically designed to keep the government running during economic shocks. The National Wealth Fund. At its peak, it held $113 billion in liquid assets. Today, that fund is down to somewhere between $35 and $50 billion, depending on which measurement you use. Russia has burned through between 55 and 70% of its financial cushion in 4 years. And the burning is accelerating. Here is why. Russia's budget is based on oil revenue projections. The threshold price, the minimum price Russia needs for oil to balance its budget, is $59 per barrel for Urals crude. That is the floor. Below that, Russia runs a deficit and has to pull from reserves. For the last 2 years, the actual price of Russian Urals crude has been significantly below that threshold, Because of Western sanctions, because of a global oversupply, and increasingly because Ukraine keeps blowing up the refineries that process the oil before it can be exported. The result? Russia's budget deficit in January and February 2026 alone exceeded 3.4 trillion rubles, just in 2 months. Meanwhile, oil and gas revenues in January 2026 collapsed by more than 50% compared to the previous year. 50%. In 1 year, the Kremlin has responded by raising taxes. VAT went from 20 to 22% in 2026. The federal government is borrowing at interest rates near 17%. Russian banks are essentially the only buyers of government bonds because no one else will touch them. Economists at the German Institute for International Security Affairs have described Russia's current fiscal situation as the worst it has been since the war started. Not since any particular month, since the war started. And the Onero Institute's analysis of 3 fiscal scenarios all arrive at the same endpoint. If Russia's national wealth fund is largely depleted by late 2026 or early 2027, the government will face forced choices between 2026 and 2028. Not collapse, but forced cuts, rising public debt, devaluation risk, the kind of internal pressure that authoritarian governments can manage until they cannot. 2028 is the year those chickens come home to roost. That is the year Zelensky is pointing at. All of this, the refinery strikes, the financial pressure, is made possible by something Ukraine has been quietly engineering for months. Something most mainstream coverage has completely missed. Ukraine has been systematically destroying Russia's air defense network. Not the missiles, not the tanks, the radars, the tracking systems, the early warning assets that tell Russian air defenses where incoming drones and missiles are coming from. The eyes. Between June 2025 and early March 2026, Ukrainian forces conducted more than 492 verified strikes on Russian air defense infrastructure, launchers, radars, electronic warfare assets, command systems. That number comes from a database of 1,530 verified attacks, analyzed by the Kyiv Independent. In March 2026 alone, Ukraine's unmanned systems forces destroyed 41 Russian air defense units in just 1 month. The results are visible. In late March 2026, Ukraine destroyed an S-400 Triumph system in the Tula region, one of Russia's most advanced mobile air defense platforms capable of tracking nearly 100 targets simultaneously. Earlier that month, the Bryansk region lost its Buk M3 system. In January, a 9S-32M1 radar, part of Russia's S-300V system, was destroyed with video evidence. A Pantsir S-1 system was neutralized near Melitopol. Each destroyed radar is a gap in Russia's air defense coverage. Each gap is a corridor. Each corridor is a new route for Ukrainian drones and missiles to reach targets that were, 12 months ago, completely out of reach. That is why Ukraine is now hitting refineries 1,200 kilometers from its border. That is why the Tuapse refinery keeps burning despite active air defenses. That is why a factory in Cheboksary, which makes navigation components for Russian missiles 1,200 kilometers from Ukraine, was hit by Ukraine's new Flamingo cruise missile in May 2026. That is why the commander of Ukraine's 413th Regiment said publicly this month that hitting Russian military targets is now 3 times easier than it was before. 3 times easier, because Ukraine spent a year removing the eyes before it went after the targets. Now, if all of this were just financial theory, you could argue it is wishful thinking. But the battlefield this week is making the same argument. According to data compiled by the Institute for the Study of War, in the single week of May 19 to May 26, 2026, Russian forces suffered a net loss of 38 square miles of Ukrainian territory, their largest single-week loss in 2026 so far. And over the previous 4 weeks, from April 28 to May 26, the total net loss for Russia reached 100 square miles. Not gains, losses. 100 square miles of territory that Russia is controlling less of than it was a month ago. This is happening during the period when the Kremlin was supposed to be launching its summer offensive. The 58th Combined Arms Army, the VDV airborne forces. Russia had assembled what its own military planners were calling a major push. And instead of breaking through, it is losing ground, on the very week it was supposed to be advancing. Bloomberg reported on May 22 that some senior Kremlin officials privately believe the war has reached a dead end. Not victory, not progress, a dead end. These are not Ukrainian officials saying this. These are sources inside the Russian government. Meanwhile, Putin is still publicly claiming he expects to take full control of the Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts by the end of 2026. His own officials do not believe that timeline is achievable. That gap between what Putin says publicly and what Kremlin insiders believe privately is not just a political problem. It is a fracture in the decision-making structure of the Russian state, and fractures under sustained pressure tend to grow. Let us zoom out now and read all of this as one picture. Putin's strategy for 4 years has been simple: outlast everyone, outlast Ukraine, outlast Western support, outlast the economic pressure, take the losses, absorb the pain, and eventually the other side breaks first. It is a strategy that has worked for Russia historically. It worked against Napoleon. It worked against Hitler. The Russian state has a deep cultural and institutional capacity for absorbing punishment and continuing to function. But this war is not 1812, and it is not 1942. In 1812, Russia did not have a national wealth fund counting down to zero. In 1942, Russia did not have an opponent methodically dismantling its air defense grid from 1,200 kilometers away using autonomous drones. In neither of those wars did Russia's refining capacity sit at a 16-year low because of precision strikes on its own soil. The variables are different this time. The financial clock is different. The manpower arithmetic is different. The industrial equation is different. And Zelensky has read those variables. That is what the 2028 declaration is. It is not a cry for help. It is a statement of strategic confidence based on a specific calculation. Russia's financial reserves will face their most critical stress point between 2026 and 2028. Russia's manpower replacement rate is already below its loss rate. Russia's oil refining capacity is at a 16-year low and falling. And Russia's own senior officials privately admit there is no clear path to victory. Zelensky is not asking Ukraine to endure 2 more years of suffering for no reason. He is saying, hold for 2 more years, and the structure of this war will change fundamentally, not because of any single battle, but because the economics become impossible for Moscow to manage. The country that started this war, believing it would take Kyiv in 3 days, is now being asked to fund it for 3 more years. With depleted reserves, with falling oil revenue, with a recruitment pool that is shrinking, and with an opponent that is not breaking. That is, in fact, getting better at hitting targets every month. Putin is still projecting confidence. He is still talking about final victory. He is still running the same playbook. But the clock on his wall is running out faster than the one on Zelensky's. And Zelensky just made sure the whole world knows he knows that. We will keep tracking every development in this conflict with the depth it deserves. Stay with us.